Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at disaster prevention maps.
Ooh.
You know, the kind that are supposed to show you how to get to safety if there's like an emergency.
Right.
We found this really interesting research paper from Taiwan
Yeah.
about how these maps are designed,
Yeah.
and more importantly, how well they actually work.
It's something that people don't think about a lot.
Yeah.
But as we'll see, it can be really important, even life or death.
Okay, so imagine this. You're a tourist in Taiwan. You're near a nuclear power plant.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden, like, alarms are going off, there's an emergency evacuation.
Right.
What do you even do? Where do you go?
Well, you'd probably look at a disaster prevention map.
Right.
But the question is, would that map actually help you get to safety?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're like totally panicking.
Especially when you're in a new place.
Exactly. That's what this research team wanted to find out. They made a virtual environment, and they had people try to find assembly points using the maps.
And what'd they find? Did it work?
It was really interesting. They found that people had a lot of trouble finding those assembly points.
Really?
Even when they had the map.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
You'd think having a map would be the solution.
Right. But
it turns out that
the map itself can actually be part of the problem.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's not enough to just have a map. It needs to be designed, well,
Okay, what makes a good map?
especially in an emergency.
Yeah.
That's when good wayfinding is really important.
So what did they find? What were the problems with these maps?
Well, first of all,
Yeah.
the icons they used to show the assembly points were too big and sometimes in the wrong place.
Like if the icon is huge, it's hard to know exactly where to go.
Exactly, and every second counts in an emergency.
Right.
So even a small mistake can be a big problem.
Okay, so icons, what else?
Well, they also had trouble with how landmarks were shown.
Like what kinds of
Like
landmarks?
temples or community centers.
Okay, so they were marked on the map.
Yes, but it wasn't clear how they were related to each other, like spatially.
Okay.
It's like having ingredients for a recipe but not knowing what order to add them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It makes it hard to figure out where you are and plan a route.
Okay, so landmarks then what?
There were also inconsistencies with road names.
How so?
Some were missing and others were really hard to read.
Oh, gosh.
And sometimes important intersections were hidden behind those big icons we talked about.
Oh, no.
You couldn't even see how the roads connected.
That's like trying to do a maze where someone scribbled all over it.
Exactly.
Okay, so these are all problems with the map design.
Yeah.
But what about the people using the maps? Maybe they just weren't looking at them properly.
Well, they actually had a control group who had the map with them the whole time, and even they had problems.
So it's not just about remembering to use the map.
Right.
It's about the map itself, making it hard to find your way.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to design maps with the user in mind.
User-centered design. Even for something as simple as a disaster prevention map.
It can make all the difference. It's amazing how a good map can really help people like that.
Yeah.
It makes me think about map literacy. It's like a skill
Yeah.
that's super important, but people don't always think about it.
Especially now with GPS on our phone.
Right.
I feel like I can't even read a paper map anymore.
Exactly. But what if you're in an emergency and your phone dies?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Or there's no signal,
You'd have to rely on a paper map.
and then those skills become really important.
So what does it mean to be map literate? Is it just knowing north, south, east, west?
It's definitely more than that.
Oh.
You need to understand scale, like how distances on the map match up to real life.
Right.
And you need to be able to orient yourself, understand the symbols, and visualize how the map relates to the actual world.
It's like seeing the world through the map's eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And being able to make decisions based on that.
Okay, so besides basic map reading skills, what else affects how well we can use a map in an emergency?
Well, we talked about spatial ability,
Right.
but stress and anxiety are also really important factors.
Oh, yeah.
In a high-pressure situation.
Yeah.
Even someone who's really good with maps might have trouble thinking clearly.
I know I do.
And you mentioned earlier about cultural background.
Oh, right.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, you said it could influence how people use maps.
Yeah, different cultures have different ways of thinking about space and direction. Some might focus more on landmarks, while others use cardinal directions or even the stars.
I've heard about some indigenous cultures that use songs and stories to map their land.
That's fascinating.
It's amazing how different people can be.
Right, and those cultural differences can really affect how people understand and use maps.
So a map that works well in one culture might not be effective in another.
Exactly.
Huh.
which is something to keep in mind for disaster prevention maps.
Especially because they need to be accessible to everyone.
Exactly. It's about designing maps that are culturally sensitive
Okay.
and that consider all the different ways people understand space.
So it's not just about map literacy or spatial ability.
Right.
It's also about stress,
Yeah.
cultural differences, all these factors combined.
Yeah, it's pretty complex,
It is. It makes you realize how much goes into designing a good map.
especially one that can save lives in an emergency.
So how do researchers actually test these maps in the real world?
Well, besides simulations, they
Mhm.
do field studies.
What's that?
They observe how people use maps in real environments.
So they give someone a map
Yeah.
and tell them to find a certain location,
Exactly. But they're navigating actual streets and buildings, not a virtual world.
like a real-life treasure hunt.
Yeah, but with much higher stakes.
I can imagine.
It adds a lot more challenges. You have traffic crowds,
Well,
weather.
there's things you don't have in a simulation.
Exactly. And that's what makes field studies so valuable.
That's like real-world data.
Right. You see
Mhm.
how people actually use maps, and you can get feedback from them.
What worked, what didn't?
Exactly. It's a really good way to test and improve maps.
So they're watching people use the maps and getting feedback.
Yeah, it helps them create the most effective maps possible.
Makes sense. But I bet there are ethical considerations, too.
Of course.
You can't just put people in danger
No, definitely not.
just to test a map,
Ethical considerations are always important in research.
especially with something like disaster preparedness.
Absolutely. So researchers are very careful.
How do they make sure people are safe?
Well, first they get informed consent from the participants. So
Okay.
people know what the research is about
Right.
and the potential risks.
So they can say no if they want to?
Exactly. And they always get clear instructions and safety guidelines.
Hmm.
And researchers also choose the locations carefully.
Oh, okay.
They want to minimize any real danger.
So they wouldn't test during an actual evacuation?
Right. They'd choose a time and place that's safer.
Makes sense.
And they always have trained people watching.
To make sure everything's okay.
Exactly. It's all about getting good data while keeping people safe.
That's good to know. So what's next for disaster prevention maps?
Well, this field is always changing
Right.
with new technology and new research.
Okay.
One really exciting area is augmented reality.
Augmented reality.
Yeah, like those apps that show virtual objects in the real world.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
Imagine using that for navigation. Instead of a paper map, you could hold up your phone
Okay.
and see evacuation routes and assembly points overlaid on your view.
It's like having a virtual guide
Exactly.
leading you to safety.
It could be really helpful.
Yeah, especially for people who are new to the area.
Or who have trouble with traditional maps.
It's like those sci-fi movies with holographic projections.
It's not that far off.
Wow.
And it could make maps more intuitive and accessible.
Okay. What else besides augmented reality?
Artificial intelligence is another big one.
AI.
Yeah, researchers are using AI to analyze data from past disasters.
To see how people evacuate.
Right, and they can use that information to create better maps for the future.
Okay, so they're using past data to predict future behavior
Exactly.
and make maps that are more effective.
Right.
Anything else AI can do?
They're also using it to create personalized evacuation routes.
What does that mean?
So if someone has mobility issues,
Okay.
they could get a route that avoids stairs or hills.
Mm-hmm.
Or if someone's afraid of crowds,
Yeah.
they could be directed to a less crowded assembly point.
So it's like a custom escape plan.
Exactly. It's about using technology to make maps that are tailored to individual needs.
That's really cool.
It's amazing how technology can help keep people safe.
It is. But what if the technology fails?
That's a good point. We
Yeah.
can't rely on it completely.
We still need those basic map reading skills.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance.
Using technology, but also having those essential skills.
Exactly. Just in case.
Yeah, it's like we need a backup for our backup plan.
Right.
Never underestimate the power of a good old paper map.
Yeah.
But technology is really changing things for disaster prevention.
Definitely.
So I'm wondering, are there other areas where we could use these maps and these design principles?
Totally.
I mean, besides like emergencies.
Definitely any place where people have to navigate a space that's complicated.
Okay.
Like hospitals, airports, big shopping malls.
Oh my gosh, hospitals are the worst.
I know, right?
They're like mazes. I always get lost.
Exactly. And if the signs and maps are bad,
Yeah,
it can cause so much stress and waste time.
it's true.
But we can make those spaces so much easier to navigate just by using the same principles we talked about.
Clear signs.
Right. Accurate maps.
User-centered design.
Exactly. It's not just about convenience either. It can actually be a safety issue.
Yeah, especially in a hospital where people might be feeling stressed or sick already.
Absolutely. And it's not just physical spaces either.
What do you mean?
This applies to the digital world too.
Okay.
Websites, apps, online platforms.
Interesting. So you're saying that the way a website is designed can affect how easy it is to use.
Exactly. It's like wayfinding for the internet. You need a clear, structure, intuitive menus and content that's easy to find.
Okay.
A good website should guide you just like a good map.
That makes sense. It's the same principle.
Exactly. Whether it's physical or digital, it's all about guiding people.
So we're constantly trying to find our way.
Yeah, in the real world and online.
We've covered a lot today,
We have.
from disaster maps to wayfinding in general.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is. So what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is that maps aren't just about navigation.
Oh.
They show us how we understand the world, both physically and mentally.
So next time I see a map, I should really think about it.
Think about how it was designed and how it could be even better.
I will. That's great advice. Thanks so much for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of maps and wayfinding. It's more important than you might think. Remember, good design can make all the difference, and that's true whether you're navigating a crisis or just trying to find your way in everyday life. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.